moving on into the rest of our fat loss discussion, I want to address some of the myths. As well as in my first episode of this podcast, I discussed how we know what we do about nutrition and exercise, different types of studies and evidence and how strong that evidence is. And I realized after recording it that one thing I neglected to talk about that I wanted to was something called anecdata. And that is a mesh of the words anecdote and data. An anecdote is just a personal story that someone will share. And anecdata is, kind of a term that was coined for people who will share their personal experience and use their personal experience in whatever realm as sort of fact and hard scientific evidence. And usually, they have good reason to feel that way because they have had an experience in a certain way. But the flaw of this is that most people who are sharing anecdata with you might not have a very good understanding of the limitations and the controls and the other factors that might have gone into it. So I don't want to say it's bad evidence. I certainly don't want to say it's not evidence. Everything is evidence. It's just not very strong and compelling evidence. So if ever somebody is sharing anecdata with you and stating that this must be truth and scientific fact, I would encourage you to be very skeptical of that. There are a lot of myths surrounding weight loss, and unfortunately, I think a big reason for why there are so many myths and misinformation in this realm is because simply a lot of people are not interested in doing the hard work required to get these favorable outcomes. And they are always looking for a magic pill or a well-kept secret that someone is willing to share with them that will just make all their problems go away. But really all that is profitable for the person sharing those things with you. There really is no magic secret. It's consistency, controlling your diet, and increasing your activity level. Anyways, going into some of those myths, I see things like a lot of people will say, well, calories in, calories out doesn't work. It doesn't matter. It's not how weight loss is dictated. It's dictated by your hormones and by your insulin levels in your blood. Some people will say your weight loss is caused by these processed foods and it's caused by these food additives and artificial colors and preservatives. The reason that America is getting so fat is because these chemicals are harmful and cause our body to gain body fat. And both of those arguments are true in some ways. They are. And you might be surprised to hear me say that, but they're not true. They're not true in the sense that calories in and calories out don't matter. They're not true in the sense that those are actually the things that at the end of the day dictate your weight loss, but they have some aspects of truth involved in them. For example, a very common thing is for women with PCOS, which is polycystic ovarian syndrome, to say that they are unable to lose weight because their PCOS affects their hormones. As well as people say, oh, well, as a man, if you don't, eat raw liver, then your testosterone is going to be low. And if your testosterone is low, then you're never going to lose body fat because it's the fat loss hormone. And those things are true. If you, for example, I don't want to be sensitive to somebody who tells you should be eating raw liver, but I will be definitely sensitive to somebody with PCOS. If there's anybody who hears this that has PCOS, your hormones do affect your weight loss. They do. But they affect your weight loss in a way that if your hormones are messed up and not optimal, you might just feel tired and groggy. You might not feel energized and motivated to go to the gym and be active. You might feel sick and tired and feel more comfortable staying at home, laying down. Those things do affect your weight loss, but they affect your weight loss because they affect the amount of calories out that you burn. Same with testosterone. Low testosterone would do the exact same thing, as well as your insulin or hunger hormones, or if those things get out of whack, they can increase your hunger, often causing you to eat more food, which does affect your weight loss, but it affects your weight loss because it affects the amount of calories in. So these things are true, but they are true by means of calories in and calories out. Same with the ingredients that I wanted to talk about. these ultra processed foods and the things like that, the colors and the additives and the preservatives, they of themselves are not causing obesity, but these ultra processed foods and these additives that you put in them that make them more stable, have a longer shelf life, have a better texture, they make these foods cheaper and therefore more readily available for people to consume, and they make these foods hyper palatable. So when you start eating them, you don't want to stop eating them. So it leads to an overconsumption of calories. The same can be talked about for the flip side, healthy foods. People say the reason you're not losing fat is because you're not eating healthy foods. And I mean, you should be eating healthy foods if you're trying to lose weight because it makes it easier. So for example, if you're eating a diet that is high in fiber and a diet that is high in protein, you're going to feel full longer. Those foods increase your satiety. That is your feeling of fullness. If you eat high volume foods like fruits and vegetables, then the amount of food in your stomach, in your digestive system, will stretch it out and send signals to your body that you are full and you can stop eating. Therefore, weight loss is easier. However, it is possible to eat foods like Twinkies and ultra-processed foods, and it is possible to have bad hormones and still lose weight if your calories in are less than your calories out. There was actually, you may have heard about a professor a little while ago now, I believe, out of Kansas State University. He was a professor of nutrition, and they call him the Twinkie Man because he underwent a diet where he ate just 1,800 calories a day of things like Twinkies. I believe he took a vitamin and mineral supplement as well as had some protein shakes to make sure that he stayed healthy throughout this. But then the remainder of his calories came from unhealthy, ultra-processed foods like Twinkies. And he lost weight. His blood cholesterol levels improved. And, people sometimes will hear that and be like, oh, that's awesome. I'm going to do that. And again, I take a step back and I say, while it's possible, it's not likely that that's going to happen if you're not strict to that diet because, 1,800 calories of Twinkies is not very many Twinkies. You're going to feel very, very hungry all the time, and that will lead you to eat more food. It is a very valuable tool to eat those healthy foods like fruits and vegetables and fiber and whole grains and protein. Moving on, there are some people, nowadays it's the carnivore diet. Many people will just push their one type of diet. A long time ago, that was the vegan diet. Like I said, nowadays more so it's the carnivore diet. I think the ketogenic diet has always kind of been around. And again, a lot of these people will kind of use anecdata to support their claims, tell personal stories about the changes that they saw. And again, I don't want to invalidate or say that these stories weren't true, but in any of these diets, the reason you lost weight is because your calories in were less than your calories out. They are all restrictive in a variety of ways, and usually that restriction leads to a calorie deficit. Now, the thing that I think is funny is that back when the vegan and vegetarian diets were more popular, you would see people share their anecdotes about the diet, and they would say, well, when I switched to being a vegan, my hair and my skin got healthier, I had more energy, I had less brain fog, things like that. Very, very desirable side effects of this diet. But the funny thing now is that now that people are adopting the carnivore diet, which is a diet of nothing but meat and eggs, and in some cases, some people include dairy, that is the polar opposite of the vegan and vegetarian diet. And they'll say the same things. They'll say, oh, I started the carnivore diet. Now my hair and my skin look amazing and are so healthy, and I have more energy and I have less brain fog. It's the exact same benefits of the vegan diet that people are purporting while they're polar opposite diets. So perhaps those are benefits of being in a calorie deficit and improving your body composition. Now, the ketogenic diet, that is just a diet where you remove all carbohydrates from your diet with the exception of some fiber. But all starches and sugars, you cut them out of your diet. I think most of you will be familiar with the ketogenic diet. That is one that has been popular for a very long time, is still very popular. And while it can be effective, I do not recommend the ketogenic diet to anyone outside of someone with a certain metabolic sickness like type 2 diabetes. If you're just trying to lose weight and you have no adverse health, scenarios, you're not in that position, I don't really recommend it. But I want to dive into why it's so popular. So our bodies, let me start over. Our preferred source of energy are carbohydrates. And I might receive some flack for saying that, but it's true. That's because carbohydrates are the most efficient source of energy. So remember back when we were talking about the respiratory quotient. At that point where we're burning strictly carbs, it's usually happening during high intensity exercise. And the reason for that is because our body is very efficient at converting those carbohydrates into fuel. So it's optimal for things like high intensity exercise. Now, because of that, we store our carbohydrates in the form of glycogen all throughout our body. We store them in our muscle cells, and we store a good amount in our liver as well, so that the liver can shuttle them out to whatever tissues need them. And that glycogen stored in the muscle or the liver is accompanied by water. Carbs are water soluble. And there's, certain debates over how much water, but I think a general consensus is that 1 gram of glycogen stores is going to be accompanied by 2 to 3, sometimes people will say 4 grams of water. Now, say that you go on a ketogenic diet. Throughout perhaps that first week of the diet or perhaps the first few days, your body will start burning up those glycogen stores in your muscle and in your liver, and you won't be eating any carbs to replace that glycogen, which means that the stores get depleted. And when the glycogen is depleted, that water that was with the glycogen will also get depleted. You'll simply pee or sweat it out. But then, all because you have lowered your carb intake, you will rapidly lose a lot of body weight. Notice how I said body weight. You'll step on the scale and you were 250 pounds at the start of the week, and now at the end of the week, you're 240 pounds. Sometimes even better, maybe you're 235 pounds. And you think, oh my goodness, this ketogenic diet is incredible. And again, you've restricted food, meaning you've likely restricted your calories in. And so it can be a viable means for weight loss. However, at the next point where you eat carbohydrates, especially many people on the ketogenic diet will become very diet fatigued and they will binge after. They move away from their diet and they binge and they eat a lot of carbohydrates. When you eat those carbohydrates, your muscles and your liver will replace their glycogen stores very quickly and very rapidly along with that water. And then all of a sudden in one day, you've gained back a significant portion of the weight that you thought you lost. And the unfortunate thing about this is it could actually, for a lot of people, reinforce the idea of how wonderful the keto diet is because once they finally ate carbs again, they got fat again and they gained all that weight back. And so they believe that the ketogenic diet is the only one that works, whereas that's not actually the case.